In the 8th century BCE, the Greek world was a scatter of small, quarreling communities clinging to rocky coasts and islands. There was no single Greece, only city-states, each with its own laws, gods, favors, and ambitions. Yet from this world of farmers, sailors, and warriors came some of the most influential ideas in human history: democracy and philosophy, tragedy and history, mathematics, and new ways to think about the gods. Over the next 7 centuries, Greek cities would fight each other, unite against mighty empires, carve out kingdoms across the eastern Mediterranean, and then fall under foreign rule. This is the story of that Greek world over about 700 years, from the rise of the city-state to the age of Alexander and his successors. How did a landscape of rival polis create a culture that still shapes politics, art, and thought today? This is the story of how Greek civilization was born, flourished, and transformed. Around the 8th century BCE, the Greek world entered what is known as the Archaic Age. Small communities in mainland Greece, the Aegean Islands, and the coast of Asia Minor developed into city-states, or polis, each with its own territory and citizen body. These polis were fiercely independent and often rivals, but they shared language, gods, and customs. Population growth and limited farmland pushed many Greeks to sail outward, founding colonies from the Black Sea to southern Italy and Sicily. These colonies spread Greek culture and trade networks across the Mediterranean. At the same time, epic poets like Homer preserved tales of heroes and gods that gave the Greeks a shared mythic past. New forms of warfare appeared, as heavily armed citizen soldiers, the hoplites, fought in tight formations called phalanxes. Aristocratic elites dominated politics, but social tensions grew as wealth changed hands and new groups demanded a say in power. The basic map of the Greek world was now in place, but its internal struggles were only beginning. In the 7th and 8th centuries BCE, many Greek city-states were ruled by narrow aristocratic elites. These families owned most of the land, led the armies, and held the key religious offices. But as trade grew and new wealth appeared, merchants, craftsmen, and poor farmers pushed against this old order. Debt, land hunger, and political exclusion led to deep social unrest. In several polis, ambitious leaders stepped into this tension and seized power as sole rulers, later called tyrants. These tyrants were not always cruel. Some built temples, sponsored festivals, and improved city defenses. They weakened the old aristocracies and sometimes supported wider participation in public life. Yet their personal rule remained unstable, often depending on force and family alliances. Over time, many tyrannies were overthrown, leaving behind cities that had tasted both reform and repression. The struggle between elite control and broader participation was reshaping Greek politics and opening the way for new experiments in government. On the southern peninsula of the Greek mainland, the city-state of Sparta followed a very different path. By the 7th century BCE, the Spartans had conquered their neighbors in Messenia and turned much of the population into helots, a class of unfree laborers bound to the land. To control this large, resentful group, Sparta built a harsh military society. Boys left home at a young age to enter the agoge, a state-run training system that turned them into disciplined hoplite soldiers. Adult male citizens lived in military barracks, ate in common messes, and were expected to put the city above family and wealth. Laws and customs discouraged luxury and trade. Equality among Spartan citizens was praised, at least in theory. A council of elders, elected officials, and 2 kings shared power, but real influence lay with the warrior elite. Sparta became famous across Greece for its tough soldiers and strict way of life.
This hard, disciplined state would soon play a central role in Greek affairs. While Sparta built a warrior state, Athens moved in a different direction. In the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, Athens faced deep tensions between rich landowners and poorer farmers trapped in debt. To prevent collapse, the Athenians turned to lawgivers and reformers. Solon, in the early 6th century, canceled many debts, freed debt slaves, and opened political rights to new groups based on wealth rather than birth. His reforms did not solve everything, and Athens later fell under the rule of the tyrant Pisistratus and his sons. Yet even these tyrants sponsored public works, festivals, and a stronger sense of civic identity. After their fall, the statesman Cleisthenes reorganized the citizen body into new tribes, broke the power of old clans, and created institutions where citizens could vote in an assembly and serve on large juries. By the late 6th century BCE, Athens had laid the foundations of a radical form of citizen rule that would become known as democracy. This experiment in shared power would soon be tested by dangers from abroad. After the Persian Wars, many Greek city-states formed an alliance led by Athens known as the Delian League. Its original purpose was to continue the fight against Persia and protect the Aegean from future attacks. Over time, however, Athens turned this alliance into an empire. Tribute from member states funded a strong navy and grand building projects on the Acropolis, including the Parthenon. Under leaders like Pericles, Athens became a center of art, drama, philosophy, and historical writing. Citizens met in the assembly to debate war, laws, and public spending, while playwrights staged tragedies and comedies that questioned gods and politics alike. Yet the wealth and power of Athens bred resentment among its allies and fear in rival cities. Could this school of Greece also be its bully? As tensions grew, the Greek world moved step by step toward a new and devastating conflict. Fear of Athenian power pushed Sparta and its allies into open conflict with Athens in 431 BCE. What followed, known as the Peloponnesian War, dragged on for nearly 3 decades and drew in most of the Greek world. At first, Athens relied on its walls and navy, while Sparta ravaged the countryside of Attica. A plague struck crowded Athens and killed many, including Pericles. The war shifted from land to sea and back again, with revolts, massacres, and harsh reprisals on both sides. At one point, Athens launched a huge expedition against Sicily, hoping for a decisive victory, but the campaign ended in disaster, with its fleet and army destroyed. Over time, Sparta built its own navy with Persian support and challenged Athenian control of the sea. In 404 BCE, a starving and exhausted Athens finally surrendered. The war left Sparta victorious, but Greece as a whole weakened, divided, and less able to face new threats. After the fall of Athens, Sparta tried to rule the Greek world. It placed garrisons and pro-Spartan governments in many cities and demanded obedience. But Sparta's narrow citizen base and harsh style of control caused resentment. The war had shaken economies and societies, and no city had the strength to build a lasting, stable order. Persia, watching from the sidelines, played Greek states against each other with gold and diplomacy. In the early 4th century BCE, new coalitions formed and old alliances broke apart. The city of Thebes, once overshadowed by Sparta and Athens, began to rise under talented generals like Epaminondas. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE, Theban forces used new tactics to crush the Spartan army and shatter its reputation. For a brief time, Thebes dominated central Greece and even marched into the Peloponnese. Yet this Theban ascendancy was short-lived, and constant warfare left most Greek cities exhausted and vulnerable to a power rising in the north.
To the north of the old Greek heartland lay Macedonia, a kingdom of farmers and warrior nobles speaking a Greek-related language. For much of earlier history, southern Greeks saw Macedonians as semi-barbaric outsiders. In the mid-4th century BCE, King Philip II transformed this marginal kingdom into a major power. He reformed the army, creating a new kind of phalanx armed with long spears called sarissas, supported by cavalry and siege weapons. Using diplomacy, marriage alliances, and force, Philip expanded Macedonian control over neighboring regions and intervened in Greek city disputes. After defeating a coalition of Greek states at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE, he established Macedonian hegemony over most of Greece. City-states kept their institutions but lost their freedom of action in foreign policy. Philip then planned a grand campaign against the Persian Empire, presenting it as a common Greek war of revenge. Before he could lead this invasion, he was assassinated, leaving his ambitious son to inherit both the throne and the unfinished plan. In 336 BCE, Philip II's son Alexander became king of Macedonia. Still in his early 20s, he moved quickly to secure his rule, crushing revolts and reasserting control over Greece. Then he launched the long-planned invasion of the Persian Empire. In a series of battles at the Granicus River, Issus, and Gaugamela, Alexander's forces defeated much larger Persian armies and drove deep into Asia. He took Egypt, where he founded the city of Alexandria, and pushed on through Mesopotamia to the Persian heartlands, capturing royal capitals like Persepolis. Alexander presented himself as both a Macedonian king and a successor to earlier rulers, adopting some Persian customs and expecting loyalty from many peoples. His army marched as far as the Indus Valley before his soldiers, exhausted and far from home, refused to go farther. On the return journey, Alexander planned new campaigns and reforms, but in 323 BCE, he died suddenly in Babylon. His vast empire, built with such speed, now faced a fierce struggle over who would control it. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his generals, known as the Diadochi, fought bitter wars over his empire. The result was a patchwork of large kingdoms ruled by Macedonian dynasties, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in much of Asia, and the Antigonids in Macedonia and parts of Greece. These states kept royal courts, professional armies, and ambitious building projects. Greek and Macedonian elites settled in new cities such as Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamon, which became major centers of trade, learning, and art. Local traditions mixed with Greek language and culture in a wide Hellenistic world that stretched from the Mediterranean to the edges of India. Philosophers, scientists, and inventors worked in royal libraries and museums, studying everything from geometry to astronomy to human emotion. Ordinary people lived under kings instead of city assemblies, but they moved, traded, and worshipped in a shared cultural zone. Was this still the old polis world or a new kind of Greek civilization altogether? In time, rising powers in the West would decide its fate. Over roughly 700 years, the Greek world moved from scattered early polis to aristocrats and tyrants, from the harsh discipline of Sparta to the radical democracy of Athens, from victory against Persia to the ruin of the Peloponnesian War. No single city could hold lasting control. Instead, power passed from Sparta to Thebes and then to Macedon under Philip II. With Alexander the Great, Greek arms and culture spread across the Near East, creating the wide Hellenistic kingdoms that followed his death. The old independence of the polis faded, but Greek language, art, and ideas reached farther than ever before. In time, Rome conquered these lands, but Roman elites read Greek texts, studied in Greek schools, and filled their cities with Greek-style statues and temples.
The Greek past became a part of a larger imperial story. Without this long history, would politics, science, philosophy, and drama in the West look anything like they do today? Modern ideas of citizenship, rational debate, historical writing, and even geometry still carry a Greek imprint. That is why the Greek world, though long gone, continues to shape how people think about power, reason, and the good life. If you enjoyed seeing centuries of history condensed into a short story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys through the past. Tell me in the comments which civilization or period you want to see in our next video.